The Last of Us Part 2 is actually about you. Okay, I'll admit, that's a pretty loaded way to start off a video. So right now you might be asking yourself, who does this guy think he is, making a Last of Us Part 2 video in 2023? This game is old news. And you might be right. This story has seen its fair share of coverage over the last 3 years. However, after having just finished the game for the second time, I feel there's a lot I could cover here. I make this video knowing it might not do very well with the algorithm, and from just a quick search, it seems there are plenty of other people who have made similar essays to this one. But you know what? I don't really care. I don't give a fuck! I'm simply here to bring my own perspective to a game all about perspective. Alright, before we get down to business, this essay will primarily be focused on the story of Part 2, but I will be evaluating the series more broadly as well. That being said, this is your spoiler warning for the series up until the second game. I'll give you 5 seconds to click away if you somehow manage to avoid hearing about any of this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Video games possess an inherent advantage over other forms of media, in that you can physically control characters within the story. This enables a higher level of empathy, because it feels as though you are experiencing what they're experiencing. Your heart pounds out of your chest while traversing through a high-speed car chase. Your palms sweat profusely as you slither through a horde of nightmarish monsters, and you might even shed a tear or two during a moment of devastating tragedy. Games have the ability to bring you in like no other, and that's exactly why The Last of Us Part 2 chose to weaponize this aspect of the medium.
You gonna kill me like a coward?
Over the years, Naughty Dog has sparked a debate around ultra-cinematic games, and if they're beneficial to the medium or detrimental. Some people want games to be, well, more gamey, while others pick up the controller intending to seek out new stories, ones they can't experience anywhere else. I'm personally at a place in my life where I don't play video games very much anymore. However, the exception to this rule is typically Naughty Dog games. That's because, without fail, these games feature themes about life that transcend beyond the TV screen. The Last of Us Part 2 aggressively pushes the boundaries of what we even consider a video game to be. Can I really say I had fun playing The Last of Us Part 2 in the same way I could say I have fun playing Mario Kart? To be entirely honest, no, not really. Don't get me wrong, the action is incredible and the player mechanics are excellent, but this is not a game you just throw on without a second thought. That's because this story forces you to think, to feel, and potentially even reconsider the way you go about your life. The Last of Us Part 2 requires deep introspection. It truly is the ultimate test of empathy, and we all know why. The reflexive, vitriolic hate toward Abby at the beginning of the story is entirely understandable. Not only are you forced to watch Joel, the main character of the first game and the person you've primarily played as, be unceremoniously beaten to death by this absolute unit of a woman, but just to rub salt in the wound, you are then forced to play as her for nearly half the game. This pissed people off, and anyone who says this game wasn't controversial at first is straight up in denial. This was an absolutely crazy narrative decision to make for a franchise with such a die-hard fanbase, particularly for the character of Joel. And to no surprise, many people mercilessly tore into the character of Abby, dismissing her entirely. Yet was the hatred for her justified?
Give me your hand! We're gonna have to run!
I think Abby is such a divisive character, not just because she killed Joel, but because she makes us question Joel. In the story, Abby is essentially introduced to Joel the same way we are introduced to her. She knows nothing of this man besides the fact that he killed her father in cold blood while simultaneously ripping away humanity's last hope for a cure. And we, the audience, don't learn about this detail until later on in the game. Some of the characters never learn this. I think Ellie suspects Abby is after Joel because of what happened at the hospital, but Ellie never directly finds out about Abby's father. Some people point to this game's structure as the reason why Abby is so unlikable, but I think withholding this information about her father from the audience until halfway through was an intentional decision. We are not supposed to like Abby at all at this point in the story. That's because, in the beginning, we're experiencing the world through Ellie's eyes, knowing little more than she knows. Sometimes stories provide information to the audience that the characters are unaware of to create tension. Think Hitchcock's bomb analogy. However, Other times, the viewer is dragged along for the ride, just as confused as the characters are in the story. The Last of Us Part 2 pivots between these two styles of storytelling. This results in a narrative dependent on information and what is known by certain characters at all times. From this structure stems the ultimate goal of having you, the player, come around to a person you have every right to hate. Introducing Abby and her motive for Joel's murder beforehand would have changed the story dynamics entirely. Instead, this narrative operates retroactively. It shoves this person in your face that you despise, and like a violent dog waiting to be let off the leash, you are chomping at the bit to get back at her. Much like Ellie, you have a preconceived notion regarding the type of person Abby is and her role in this story. But what happens when those notions don't align with who you thought you were hunting down?
If you die, I'll be stuck here.
We better start praying to make it.
There's some irony in the fact that when we first see Abby back at the WLF base, she's reading a book called City of Thieves. This is a real novel from a writer by the name of David Benioff that recounts the Nazi siege of Leningrad during World War II. It follows Kolya and Lev, yes, like that Lev, as they navigate their way through danger to find a dozen eggs. This novel highlights the devastating effects of violence and the meaninglessness of war, yet Abby seems to have taken nothing from this. We're actually shown that she's a big reader, literally, with a stack of books all about time and memories. Yet none of this is able to heal the wound of her father's murder. It is only when she develops her relationship with Lev that she is able to begin healing and essentially gain her heart back. And wouldn't you know it, the name Lev actually means heart. However, this act of good isn't enough to save Abby from her past mistakes. Sound familiar? Look, I hate to say it, but Joel kinda got what was coming to him. There's a reason he didn't ask Abby a bunch of questions or even beg for his life. Joel knew his hands were soaked in blood, and he accepted that, telling Abby,
Why don't you say whatever speech you got rehearsed? Get this over with.
after Joel's actions in the first game and his implied actions of the past, he didn't deserve a happy ending. He never could have gotten it. That's not how the world works. Sure, he might have been holding out hope that maybe, just maybe, his past wouldn't catch up with him, but within a few short minutes, that was stripped away. Abby has a near identical moment where she is almost at peace again. Violence didn't reconcile her past, but saving someone did, and just when she thinks it might all be over, she is thrust back into a trauma pool. What does this tell us then? Well, it shows that Abby and Joel aren't actually that different. So, depending on your opinion of Abby, you might find yourself coming to the unfortunate conclusion that Joel is not necessarily the hero you thought he was. And before you go and call me a Joel hater for saying he deserved to die, this is coming from a dude who has desperately tried to be like Joel ever since the first game was released. Flannels and all. I looked up to Joel as a positive role model when I was younger. Hell, some of my fictional idols growing up were Joel Miller, Rick Grimes, and Josh Nichols. What do all of these characters have in common? They're rugged, weathered souls, constantly pushed to their limits. They're forced to make the tough decisions, ones other people might not be able to make. They're products of the world around them, calm and calloused in the most dire situations. Okay, maybe not Josh, but the point still stands. I love Joel just as much as anyone else, but he was far from innocent, maybe even far from good. The end of the first game essentially served as a commentary about the medium of video games, with endless waves of people you mow down to reach an objective. It used a familiar game mechanic against you, making you question your actions despite the justification of saving Ellie's life. Naturally, the second game built upon this commentary, making you question the mere concept of a hero entirely, and that goes as far as to include the man behind the scenes as well. There's one small detail in The Last of Us Part 2 that really made me consider it from a fresh perspective. Relatively early on, you can pick up this collector's card for a character by the name of Dr. Uckman. The parallels to the game's creator, Neil Druckmann, are painfully obvious. However, this card also indicates Druckmann's thought process prior to the game's release. Within the description, we are given statements such as, once a well-respected researcher, Dr. Uckman's questionable experiments in the realm of pushing human limits saw him ostracized from the scientific community. He longs for the day where his subjects will be treated as equals. There's no doubt Druckmann knew this game would be polarizing, but this card seems to indicate he knew it could likely tarnish his reputation amongst fans. He could see that even laying a finger on Joel would make him a villain as well, which is why Dr. Uckman's villain to hero scale favors being a villain. I mean, he also has 100 for intellect, so maybe he's not the most modest guy out there. Regardless, this card tells me that Druckmann, as well as the game's co-writer, Hallie Gross, took this sequel as an opportunity to experiment in storytelling. There are absolutely other ways this story could have been told, and the narrative itself could have been drastically altered to mitigate criticism, but that doesn't seem to be what the goal was. Druckmann and Gross didn't want to make a sequel for the sake of making a sequel. They wanted to expand and evolve the story, regardless of how it would be perceived.
There's going to be fans of the first game that aren't going to like the second game, and that we have to be okay with that. And there's going to be people that just never played the first game are going to love the second game, and all we can do is be true to ourselves and keep making what we believe in.
And this card isn't the only thing in the game that's self-aware either. During a flashback, Ellie and Joel are talking about what we assume to be the Jurassic Park franchise, when Joel says,
See, there's a sequel. Wasn't as good.
this is an honest conclusion some people have come to regarding The Last of Us Part 2. During another flashback, Joel and Ellie talk about the Savage Starlight comics. Joel mentions what Dr. Daniela Starr did to Captain Ryan during a death match, and Ellie says in her own words,
Yeah, I mean, he definitely deserved it, but...
Yet this is what happened to Joel. The game has a habit of providing these little bits of information and then tying them back into the narrative later on. One of the best examples of this has to be Tommy's sniper. We get this nice little moment between Ellie and sweet old Tommy while they're out in the woods taking out some infected stragglers. The colors are warm and the scenery is beautiful, with the stakes relatively low here. Tommy offers Ellie the sniper to practice with, and we are given the opportunity to use it firsthand. Later on, we are then terrorized by this same sniper in the hands of Tommy, as it is used against us. This is a tense and dreary scene that ends with Manny being absolutely blasted right in front of us. I love this detail because it shows the duality of just about everything. I firmly believe Druckmann and Gross knew they were not setting out to make a bad game, but they did know the story they were planning to tell would be ripe for criticism.
We let you both live, and you wasted it.
The apparent self-awareness of The Last of Us Part 2 reminds me of this concept in art theory. It's about building the critique into that which will be critiqued. The Last of Us Part 2 did exactly this. The creators knew this game would immediately be deemed bad, or that the story would be called a mess because of what happens within the narrative. But I don't really think you can objectively call this a bad game. The graphics and gameplay are fantastic, while the story itself is coherent and well thought out at the very least. It's one thing to criticize the quality of a story, and another to disagree with the direction that was taken. It's not really fair to label this game a dumpster fire, as some people claim it to be. That all comes down to your subjective opinion, which is a whole different ballgame. Look, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that a series called The Last of Us is about all of us. I mean, it's literally right there in the title. Each and every character in this series represents the many shades of the human condition. While playing through this story, you are Joel, Ellie, and Abby, blinded by rage. If you immediately dismiss this game because of what happened to Joel, or because Ellie let Abby go, or even because of some progressive values presented here, this is about you. On the other hand, if you love this game and this series without question, so much that you will attack anyone who raises the slightest concern, if you are loyal to the very end, this is also about you. The reactions of these characters are a reflection of genuine human behavior, and although Part 2 haters didn't personally go on violent rampages in the name of vengeance, they certainly reacted that way. This story gets to us because we all know deep down that under certain circumstances, we could carry out the same heinous acts as these characters, not just of our hero, Joel, but of Abby as well, and this game forces us to confront that reality in the most visceral, gut-wrenching ways possible. But there's another side to this coin. There's also a chance of redemption, not just for these characters, but for us as well. No matter what we've done, no matter how far we've fallen, we can still bring ourselves back. And that is symbolized in Ellie's arc.
I was supposed to die in that hospital. My life would have fucking mattered. But you took that from me.
See, Ellie knew the type of person Joel was, yet she knowingly set out to avenge him despite his horrific past. And we were right there beside her, essentially carrying out the same acts as her. However, in the end, Ellie was able to do something Joel wasn't able to do, something Abby wasn't able to do, and something I know damn well I probably couldn't have done. She was able to let go. Ellie was the first person to actually break this cycle, and it wasn't even something she wanted to do, but it seemed more like an obligation. In remembering one of her final conversations with Joel, Ellie was able to see clearly that all of this hate and violence would change nothing. Killing Abby would change nothing. And ironically, it was Ellie's desire to kill Abby that actually ended up saving her life. I used to be someone who thought the ending of the game would have been stronger if the player was given a choice whether or not to kill Abby. But that's not what this story is about. Despite the illusion of a free and semi-open world, all roads still lead to the same destination. The game isn't asking you what you think should happen, it's telling you what can happen if you simply let go of your hatred for the enemy. The Last of Us Part 2 is more than just a commentary about gaming culture or internet toxicity. I believe it's really an exploration of something innate in all of us: tribalism. It's awfully fitting this game came out in 2020, an incredibly hostile and uncertain time for everyone. Ever since then, it seems things have just become more and more polarizing in the world. Tribalism seems to be prevalent in all facets of our modern society, and this franchise explores what could be on the other end if we continue down this path. We operate in a world more and more reliant on hate, but hate turns us into monsters. I mean, this is a story set in a world where a virus can turn you into a literal monster, but so can a tainted ideology that refuses to see the humanity in others. It's hard to avoid getting political when discussing Naughty Dog properties, because they've become more and more candid about certain beliefs over the years, which is cause for fair criticism in itself. I know I'm personally not a fan of real-world politics being shoved down my throat in anything.
You might want to think about changing the name to X-Women.
But I feel this is different. This story is larger than just political views. Sure, there may be some overtly political topics brought up in this story, but the core message has nothing to do with any political stances. It's simply about seeing the humanity in others, despite how different they may seem from you. The tragedy of this story is that these characters likely would have gotten along with one another if not under the particular circumstances. Joel and Abby share many similarities, and the same goes for Ellie and Abby. Abby is essentially an amalgamation of Joel and Ellie, which makes it ironic that the hatred for her runs so deep in some people. We learn through Abby that nothing in this world is black and white. After this story comes to a close, you can still hate her and want her dead, but at least now you've lived with her enough to know what you're really wishing for. Abby got what we wish Joel had gotten. Her story got to be experienced by the person trying to kill her, us. And if you take away anything from this story, it might just be that the person or group of people you hate may not actually be as evil as you think they are. With the third installment not yet confirmed, but most definitely in the works, we'll see how this story progresses, and most importantly, how it ends. My thoughts on the future of The Last of Us have become more positive since my previous video on the series. While I still think this franchise has plenty of hurdles to clear, I have a lot more faith in a third installment now. But what might that include? Some people believe Ellie will end up sacrificing herself for the cure, and I could totally see this happening. But would this really drive home the narrative theme? Joel seemingly destroyed all hope for humanity when he chose Ellie over the world. But what if this decision did matter, just in a different way than we thought? There's no doubt in my mind that Ellie and Abby will cross paths again. So how beautiful would it be to see these people, who have every right to hate one another, actually come together and offer a glimmer of hope to the world? The Fireflies operate entirely on the principle of hope. When you're lost in the darkness, search for the light. And the name Ellie does mean light after all. So she is definitely at the center of all of this. I think seeing this group of people come together and join forces to save the world, whether that be literally or metaphorically, well, that just might be the message we all need right now. If for some reason you're still here, thank you for watching. This is a video I've been thinking about making since my first Last of Us essay that came out back in March. I read nearly every comment on that video and it definitely made me want to revisit the second game from a different perspective. I also want to give a shout out to my fellow YouTuber, Cinematic Gaming Series, because this video was also heavily inspired by the responses he and I shared in that comment section. This dude has like 20 times as many subscribers as I have, but he still spent the time to comment and discuss this topic on that video. He seems like a chill dude. Check him out. And I'll also give a shout out to my roommate Jay, because he's been trying to convince all of us that this game was good ever since it was released. Alright, maybe you were right. Despite all of the points I made in this video, I completely understand anyone who still doesn't like this game because of a number of decisions that were made. It wasn't necessarily the direction I wanted them to take with this story, but it really has grown on me, and I think that's a perspective a lot of fans have taken in regards to this game. There doesn't seem to be as much hate for it now as there was when it first came out. But with the second season of The Last of Us TV series looming on the horizon, I have a suspicion we'll all be thrust back into this conversation again very soon. Anyway, thanks for watching and hopefully subscribing. I got plenty more in the works. Until next time.